Obviously, following a fantastic morning session with Mayor Tracy Raven and then a brilliant panel talking about modern municipalism, get that word right. So this afternoon we've got two equally brilliant sessions. Thank you so much. We've got, I think, almost everybody actually that was here this morning has stayed for this afternoon, so I take that as a testament to the fact that we have managed to be interesting and engaging and hopefully high energy, which we're going to continue into our panel first after lunch when everyone's probably feeling a little bit more sluggish after food. We will re-raise that energy up. So the first session that we have is essentially trying to address, I guess, three questions. So this is beyond bureaucracy. And we're all very familiar, we heard it raised several times this morning with the financial situation that local government is facing. Obviously, you know, we've had a whole stream of Section 114s, you know, lots more where we've had to have emergency funding pumped in. There is a huge challenge, so there's clearly no question about that. But I think there's a three-pronged issue that we want to get into as the panel this afternoon, which is actually how do we drive up productivity, how do we make sure we really are getting value for money, we're as efficient as we possibly can be in local government, but how do we do that at the same time as actually transforming public services so that actually the outcomes that we want to see are improving, as well as us driving up that efficiency, but also in a way that's going to keep our workforce engaged, so making sure that we're motivating those people who actually keep the show on the road, who are delivering frontline services, who are in the back office, making sure that everything is running smoothly. How do we make sure that we're achieving all three of those things simultaneously? And what role, therefore, can things like technology, and yes, at the very whizzy end, actually perhaps not quite so whizzy, degrees of whizziness on AI, how do we use that? But also, you know, some more basic things, like how are we going to fix the, you know, some creaking kind of legacy infrastructure, how do we make sure we can extract the data that we need to extract and use it in a way that's actually going to be useful in terms of driving that productivity, driving those better outcomes and supporting our workforce to be the best they can and to feel like actually they can enjoy the job and that they are delivering for the people that they're serving in their population. So I am thrilled that I've got a brilliant panel. I also want to say a huge thank you to James Johns and Workday for supporting this panel and the conference more broadly. We are a small charity at Reform, and so we do rely on our partners this morning, obviously Sheffield City Council, this afternoon Workday, to make sure we can have these brilliant conversations and bring everyone together in such illustrious surroundings as we are here. I'm also thrilled to be joined in no particular order by Alison McKenzie-Folan, who's the Chief Executive of Wigan Council and who has very kindly spoken for us before. I think actually you spoke at our last Reimagining the State conference, so it is wonderful to be welcoming you back today. Obviously you were hugely impressive last year, and so we want to make sure we make you an annual feature of our conference. And also Carol Williams, who's both, I think, double-hatted today for us, so Director for Transformation and Digital at Walsall Council, but also the President of Sockton. Did I say that right? Yeah, brilliant. And finally, who's actually a member of one of our advisory boards, which is wonderful, Angie Ridgwell, Chief Executive now of Hertfordshire Council, recently moved. So I'm sure you'll be able to reflect on previous experience and also the ambitions in the new role. So I won't say any more, hopefully that's clear. Let's try and answer just the nice simple task of how do we achieve all those three things. We've got an hour, we can solve that, right? So I am going to hand over, first of all, we'll have opening remarks of about 5 minutes from each panellist. I will have the joy of then asking a few questions, but then of course I will open it up to the floor, so be thinking about your questions as you hear from our panellists. So James, can I start with you?
Thank you, yes. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be here. I'm fascinated to find myself as the only man on the panel at a conference. I imagine this must be what it's like to be a woman at pretty much every other conference.
Yes, quite.
So, as Charlie said, I'm from Workday, and I appreciate that many of you won't be familiar with what we do, although you might have seen our name on a Formula 1 car if you're a fan of that particular sport. We're a technology company, and we pioneered AI-enabled cloud-based enterprise software. Basically for HR, finance and planning. Our software is used by about 60% of the Fortune 500, about 45% of the FTSE 100, and a growing number of public sector organisations around the world. And we've been building our public sector business here over the last few years. very excitingly from our perspective, this year we've just won part of the national government's shared services programme for HR and finance, and we've secured our first UK local government customer just a few weeks ago with Hull City Council, which is a kind of a marquee win for us. I wanted to use my opening remarks just to say a few words about why the fact that we pioneered cloud-based enterprise solutions is relevant in the context of a conversation about future-proofing local government. So basically, our software has always run in the cloud. You could never get a copy of Workday on a disk and take it down to your data center and install it and customize it as people typically have done with enterprise software in the past. So all 10,000 of our customers around the world use exactly the same software, and they all get the upgrades when we upgrade that centrally, which we do twice a year for functionality and once a week for bug fixes. And that's sort of super important in the context of future-proofing organisations. Historically, every business, including local authorities, would buy a piece of packaged software and then they would customise it to meet their own requirements. And that's generally quite a bad thing to do. For a start, it's very risky, it's expensive, and I think we could probably all list the names of local authorities that have got into hot water by doing that kind of programme, some of them markedly less effectively than others. But also, when you customise a piece of software, you tie yourself to it. You tie yourself to that version. It becomes difficult, if not impossible, to then upgrade, which means that people tend to stick around on the same piece of software for years and years and years and years, and then they have to go through a big bang kind of update. And that brings a whole lot of other inherent risks, like exposing yourself to cybersecurity challenges because you're running out-of-date software, as well as the opportunity cost of just simply not being able to benefit from the latest technology. With cloud-based software like Workday, you tune it by configuring it, not customising it. And of course, the software is designed to facilitate that. So when you get those upgrades, you don't have to worry about, will my configuration break? And you can then start to use the new features that are introduced. And the sort of topic du jour, of course, in that regard is AI. We've had AI in our products for about a decade. We're continually increasing the sort of new capabilities they've got, and maybe that would be a thing that we talk about in a little while. So that, to be clear, I perfectly well understand that the biggest challenges facing local authorities when it comes to finance and HR management are the pressures that they're under, the inexorable rise of the demands for their services at the time when funding is decreasing, and kind of attracting and motivating the workforce in that context is challenging. But I don't think anyone in this room would argue that local authorities have always been as well equipped as they should be in terms of having the tools and technology that they need to manage that set of challenges. Tracy this morning talked about the kind of issue of trust and the democratic crisis that she's also facing local organisations, local public services. And I think it's probably true to say that as we kind of embark on a new era of devolution, a key part of restoring that trust is going to be to ensure that councils and local public services, in whatever form they exist, have access to modern software, access to modern systems, are running kind of contemporary processes that allow them both to operate efficiently and to demonstrate to their stakeholders that they're a trustworthy custodian for that enhanced set of funding. It's clear that the wrong technology, or technology implemented badly, is only going to compound those challenges, but it doesn't have to be that way. We're at a really exciting time in the software world, and it's important that councils build the muscles to get better at selecting, implementing and using technology so that they can better manage their people and their money and their interactions with citizens. I think that has to be part of the answer when we're talking about how we can make more robust, future-proof local government. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, and I think probably very common issues in central government, the same as local government, around something that Reform is very passionate about in a geeky sense, which is procurement and vendor lock-in and interoperability and all these fabulous techie words that actually have a tremendous impact on how public servants can actually do their job. So thank you, James. Alison, I want to come to you to talk a bit about your experience in Wigan and how the transformation agenda, which has obviously been very citizen-led, meets these more knotty challenges around kind of productivity and efficiency and workforce.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'll probably give some high-level comments, and then I think it would be really useful and helpful perhaps if we get into the detail through the conversation and open it up to the room. So I think just following on from some of the things that you said there, I think the theme of the panel today is really incredibly relevant to Wigan. We've been asking ourselves these questions probably for the past 12 to 18 months, thinking about how we inspire our workforce, how do we really now start to harness the technology, and how do we really continue to meet what our residents need. And we have to do that by having conversations with them. And if everybody knows a bit about Wigan, then the Wigan deal's been around for 10 years, but we have some honest reflections internally and externally to say, actually, we are in a new era and we need to learn, and we need to understand things that we've done really well, some of the successes we've had, but also things where perhaps we've not done so well. So we've had a really amazing 12 months actually, and I feel privileged to have been involved in all of the conversations with our businesses, with our residents, with our community groups and with the wider partners to have a really deep conversation about future-proofing, so how do we future-proof not only the council but actually the place, and what does that look like for our businesses, what does that look like for all of the people who live in the borough, and really understand what's worked and what's not worked. And you have to be quite brave to go into those conversations, I think, particularly as a public servant. Often it's around sort of protecting reputations, isn't it? There's the political complexity. But we have been able to do that with our politicians, with Cabinet, with the wider politicians, to say, let's be honest with ourselves, let's go out and have that deep conversation. And I think the scale and complexity of the challenges that our residents face means that we actually have to do this now. We need to be radical. We need to think about, as James said, what is this new era, given we've got a new government, and we have to be serious about doing things differently. And so we've been trying to understand some of the sort of economic challenges, the social challenges, and really facing into those and thinking about what have been the magic ingredients, but at the same time, what do we need to do differently? And where that's led us really is a process of 12 months of conversations, lots of things going on in our communities. And what we've narrowed it down to, which I'm really proud of, is 2 missions. And those 2 missions are what we are collectively now organising ourselves around in terms of not just the council but all of the partners. And the first mission, and we've got to be honest with ourselves, is around fairness. So yes, we've done great things in Wigan, but actually if you look at parts of our borough, many of our residents, many of our children are still facing massive inequalities, and we need to be serious about actually how do we get fairness, and tackle those inequalities in our boroughs. So what does that mean for children? What does that mean for families? What does that mean for our residents and our businesses? And then the second thing through those conversations is we're a place made up of 14 proud towns. It's not just about Wigan. And actually all of our places have their unique identity. They're very proud. So actually how do we help all of our neighbourhoods flourish? How do people have happy and healthy lives? How do we link that to our regeneration plans? And how do we do things in a different way? So to have 2 missions after a collective conversation feels quite daunting actually, to say, right, look, we're just going to have 2 missions. But the energy around that from the sporting community, the business community, our community groups, our residents, it's a new movement of change and actually getting around that. And it happened in our 50th year anniversary of the council, so progress with unity has been the motto for our place for 50 years. And I thought, well, that's it, isn't it? Progress with unity. The only way we can do this is with everybody coming together. It's been critical to have the community sector involved, and what we're trying to do is build on the relationship that we've had, but really have the community sector at the heart of it. We know in Wigan that our community sector know the answers, and actually by stepping alongside them, listening to them, and trying to understand what it is that people can live their lives in a better way that they want to live them, then we can get those decisions made much more locally through the things that we try to do, and we can deliver our services in a much more effective way in our neighbourhoods, close to where people live. And that really requires a connected approach. So for me in the council, I've got to ensure that all parts of the council, so in terms of the workforce question, we really take an intentional approach to what does it mean to do that community health and wealth building, that you see everything that you do through the eyes of a resident and a citizen, and try and address those fundamental questions around inequalities and how we make our neighbourhoods thrive. So one of the things that I've also we've been doing for years, I've been in Wigan nearly 16 years, is how do we inspire workforce year on year after 180 million pounds of austerity cuts and so much changes. And you do that by really giving them permissions and getting behind them and creating what I have been trying to do for the last 5 years is an environment of psychological safety. that actually if you do the right thing, then you're going to be fine, and you can be yourself, you can bring your whole self to work, but it's about doing the right thing. And giving staff that permission to be able to do that and bring themselves to work and have the ideas. They're close. I think it's 90% of our staff live in the borough. You know, it's their communities, it's their families, and they want to do the right thing. So the cultural side and the workforce side has been really important to the missions. But just before I hand over to colleagues, there's sort of 6 magic ingredients that we're packaging the 2 missions around, and what we're saying to our partners and ourselves is if we carry on doing the way we do public services in these 6 ways, then actually we think we'll probably get it right. It might be a bit topsy-turvy and a bit like a roller coaster. So the first thing is see the person. For many years, and I know lots of people in this room who truly believe in asset-based working, but we truly believe in asset-based working in Wigan. So, 5,000 of our staff are going through the 3rd immersive experience on Team Wigan, and that means what we're saying to people is, when you go about doing your job, you see the person, you don't make assumptions about them, and you put people at the heart of everything we do. The second sort of magic ingredient is listen deeply, and that's hard, isn't it? Because we often make assumptions. The policy says this, the process says that, or government telling us this. No, see the person, take that. Listen deeply is around actually recognising that our communities understand what's right to them, and don't come in and make assumptions, and really listen deeply. And that means letting go and co-producing services together. The third thing relates back to what James said around some of the data issues. So we sit on so much data as public servants. So knowing this place, so what is it that we know about the place, that we would look at our data, look at our insight, take a really prevention-based approach, and understand the neighbourhoods. Don't make assumptions. The fourth thing then is so important is around connecting to neighbourhoods. We need to make sure that we're out there, connected to schools, connected to GPs, to have integrated services deep in our neighbourhoods, to have community centres in our family hubs, right on the doorstep of the communities that we work alongside. The fifth thing then, which is really, really important, is speaking to staff about doing the right thing, which I mentioned earlier. I think people have got gut instinct, haven't they, when they know the right thing is to do. So we can encourage people through that environment and cultural psychological safety to say it's okay, you just do the right thing in your job. Sometimes you can forget what it says there, just do the right thing. And then lastly, for Wigan, it's about showing love and pride. So our values around be positive, be accountable, be courageous, and be kind are at the heart of everything that we do. And therefore we're a values-led organisation, and we talk about those values, not just within the council, but across the whole borough. So really important in terms of that social movement for change. And then the last thing I'll say is really then around the opportunities and the question then around technology. We've been really passionate about technology and transformation for the last 10 years, and with the onset of AI, I think it's been massive opportunities for us as a council. So underpinning all of our work will be transformation and technology plans. It's played a massive part, and I think yes, we're having lots of ethical conversations over AI, and it depends where you are on the spectrum of whether it's going to take everybody's job away or not. But actually, I think if we're mature about the conversation that we have about AI, there are massive opportunities. We've got 200 staff now who are using it on a daily basis. We're rolling AI technology out into adult social care in areas that we never thought we would do. And actually staff are embracing it. And what it's doing is it's actually giving them time to focus on the magic ingredients. And with that, actually, you can then really get into some amazing sort of conversations about how we can use AI and technologies in different ways than perhaps we've ever done in local government. So, for me, sort of those are the sort of high-level comments. I think it's around that collaboration, it's around taking those bold approaches, and it's around being brave enough to see that we are in a new era and it's time to do things differently.
Loads there for us to get into. But Angie, so you've just taken over in Hertfordshire. I guess, can you reflect on that triple challenge that you'll be thinking about right now at that county level, of how we can move beyond what has felt like quite a bureaucratic sort of, sometimes stifling, I think, for workforce. We've heard there about empowering people to do the right thing. How are you thinking about that in your new role?
So Thank you. And as Alison says, this is all about the people. It's about the people that we serve, and it's about the people we employ to serve our residents. And it is really hard to inspire our staff who are really passionate, because actually most of the residents are their family and their friends. So they're absolutely committed to making Hertfordshire the best it can be, as indeed were my staff when I was in Lancashire. But we have some really difficult headwinds which make it very difficult for our staff to focus on that. So I'm sure some of you may have read the article in the Times this weekend which announced that my local authority is going to be reformed. Well, that would be lovely if someone had just given me a bell and told me that this was going to happen before they announced it. Now, I'm not saying it's true. We don't believe everything we read in the paper. But actually, it's really hard for me to motivate my staff, give them optimism and enthusiasm, when actually they're going to be looking at me today and saying, well, where's my job here, Angie? What's going to happen? And this is interesting because every time there is a fundamental issue, Westminster and Whitehall go for a structural change, when in fact a structural change, it may be beneficial, but in of itself is not going to give me the solutions to the problem that I'm facing as a chief exec of a local authority. And I talk about the three levers that really affect what we do for our residents. There's a statutory framework which we have to work within. And for a county council, about 75% of what we spend is demand-led statutory services. So we have very little flexibility in terms of what we can do. So we've got a statutory framework. We have a settlement which is dictated by government. So they will give us our sum of grant, which is a lot smaller in Hertfordshire than it was in Lancashire, because Lancashire is much more deprived than Hertfordshire is. But they not only give us our grant, but they also tell us how much local taxes we can raise. They put a cap on that. And then they will also, by and large, dictate what outcomes we have to deliver and what they're going to measure us for. So we have to return about 550 data stats to government, and probably just as many about specific grants that we get. So if you think about that triangle which dictates what you can do, we have very little control of any of those sides of that triangle. So really within local government, we are dancing to government's tune. And it's a sad fact that they don't always understand the consequence, the legal framework within which we work, despite the fact that they've crafted it, nor the other legal frameworks within which we operate. So very often, if you take the SEND, so children who've got special educational needs and disabilities, there is a huge legal framework which is bankrupting every upper tier local authority in the country, because government don't understand the implications of what they've set there, and they certainly haven't funded it properly. So if we're going to get that long-term future, local government needs to be given control to more of that triangle, so it can influence and make decisions in the local arena. And in particular, we need to be able to identify and raise additional resources in our own right. So that for me is one of the fundamental things that I need to do. If I can persuade government to change on any of those things, and frankly it's not me who's going to do this, I need to work with my colleagues across the sector, and we work jolly hard to do this, then I can move the organisation to one where I'm not taking hideous budget decisions every single year. So every year, my colleagues will tell you, we go through a budget round, which is about what cuts we're going to make this time, which is bad enough if you're in a council like mine, which has elections every 4 years. You know, that just gets tense. Well, it's always tense. It gets tense as you get closer to the elections. But some local authorities have elections every year, and it's really difficult to take those hard political decisions. So actually, on that basis, efficiency and effectiveness is fundamental, because I cannot go to my members and ask them to make difficult policy choices which reduces services to our public if I haven't ensured that our organisation is as efficient and effective as it possibly can be. So I'm very optimistic when I hear that we're going to get long-term settlements, because that will enable me to do strategic and tactical financial planning with my team. And that is important, because that will then allow me to settle a right-sized organisation. And I use the right size quite loosely, so an affordable sized organisation. Clarity about what we can deliver and what we can't, so starting to have that conversation which Alison has actively been having with her communities for a long time now, and then working together to create independence. And there is lots of evidence where that's worked really well. So in Hertfordshire we operate a system called the Family Safeguarding System, and in fact we stole this model, we didn't steal it, we agreed with Hertfordshire and implemented that in Lancashire before I arrived. Now what that is, it's a strength-based model which is built on the assumption, which is factually correct, that children do better within their own families rather than in institutionalised care. Okay? That's really important. It's cruel what we do to some of our children. Absolutely, care is really the best solution for some of our children. But for most children, it's staying in their home and making sure that we keep that home safe. And we work really closely with children and families to do that. And what we've stopped doing, we used to go in and say, primarily to the mother, okay, if you want to keep your child, you've got to stop smoking, get rid of alcohol, ditch your boyfriend, make sure that your children turn up at school on time in clean clothes, and also that they have a good meal on their table every day. People can't do that, it's just too much and then they don't contribute. But actually working with the families to find out what they do well and to build on those strengths makes a real difference. And in both Hertfordshire and Lancashire, we've really driven down the number of children who are taken into care. And that's absolutely better for them, it's better for their families, and it saves communities a lot of money. So actually we're a really people-based organisation, and we're taking that strength-based model in Lancashire and now in Hertfordshire, and we're applying that to all other people-based services. So we're trying to do that in adult social care. We're thinking about how can we include behavioural change when we look at waste disposal. Because actually, using people and hearing what it's like for them and putting ourselves in their shoes make a big difference. Using the data to measure results and influence our public sector colleagues to invest in this as well, because it's helping them, is phenomenal. So that data mining, that data analyst, that insight is fundamental to informing those decisions. And my absolute dream, tech is important because that will help us to do that. We can reproduce lots of intensive, repetitious work using AI. We're still responsible for what it says. But my whole sole purpose of focusing on AI is so that I can free up my staff to spend time with people, because we are a people industry. So that is my aim. So for me, moving this forward, we've got to be able to take control of resources from government, and we've got to be able to drive and influence policy. Because actually if we leave it to government, they're going to create the wrong policies time again. And I will encourage them not to look at structures, but actually get the fundamentals right. Don't think I'll win, but you've got to go.
I think you've got plenty of people lining up behind you on it though, so you've got a good chance. And actually that's a great example, the children's services, of that triple win of much more cost effective, much better outcomes for children and families, and better for the workforce, because presumably social workers would much rather be engaging in that positive way rather than feeling like it's a negative kind of enforcement thing. So it's a great example there. And then coming on to Carol, obviously you have the job of doing some of this digital transformation work, and the people side of it does at times get overlooked. And I think that's the sort of thing you're trying to focus on at the moment, of how do you make it work for the people that are actually having to do it in the workforce.
Sure. So I've been in IT for quite a long time, probably more years than I'd care to remember. So I've seen quite a
sorry, I think people are struggling. I can see. I think you might need to, or you just shout a bit.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. I'll put it there. Is that better? What if I hold it?
Yeah, you can hold it. Yeah.
Is that okay? Better.
Great.
So yes, I've been in IT and technology for quite a number of years back in the 80s, so I've seen a lot of change. And I think in those early days we thought that IT was the panacea. It was going to solve the world's problems and give everybody 4 or 5 days off work really, so that they can enjoy more leisure time. And what seems to have happened is we've just got busier and busier and busier. So at Walsall, what we're really trying to do is to do things right, do it right first time, recognising that we've got limited capacity. It's looking at the opportunities that our staff have, because as I think colleagues have said, in very many cases our staff live in our boroughs and also work at our organisations. So it's really helpful that we've got people who understand what is going on in our areas. What we talk about is building our services around the customer, so putting the customer at the heart of everything we do. And that's really to make sure that we don't over-engineer things, that we don't change processes that aren't going to work for our customer. And it's about encouraging our staff to be involved in creating those new opportunities. Particularly in my technology team, we've built a way of working which really does bring the technology people together with the customer services people, together with our residents, to understand how they want to interact. And I think also we've learned, probably the hard way, that you can't just put technology to replace people and interaction with customers. So we've worked really hard to develop something called Walsall Connected, and that's really there to help support people who aren't digitally enabled. So isn't it great to be able to digitise all of our processes to get the cost of the transactions right down? But actually, by doing that, we're alienating groups of people in our community. And we've worked really well with health and community groups to create hubs where people can come and talk and get help and be supported in learning about digital ways of accessing services. And that's a win-win for us really, because if we can reduce the amount of demand coming in through the front door and people can self-serve more, then we've got the opportunity of investing the people that we've got into dealing with those customers and residents who need our help and support. So we're focused very much on being that resident-led, resident-focused service. And in terms of the building blocks that we use, we have got quite a clear technology strategy that supports our council plan. So we've got outcomes that we're focused on delivering. We call it We Are Walsall 2040. Back in 2019, we created a piece of work where we engaged with staff, with our residents, with groups, with agencies, our partners, and we said, let's imagine if a child was born in 2019, what kind of life should they expect when they're 21? So we are building our legacy and we're building our future for not just 3 to 5 years, it's actually for somebody who's going to be 21 in the year 2040. So we are trying really hard to get those plans. Obviously you're not going to plan to the nth degree for that far in the future, but it's a direction of travel, and what that means is we can bring that right back to our council plan and to look at our data. What's the kind of information and data that we need to be able to see if we're on the right track, if we're delivering services, if we're making a difference. And it means the technology that we implement then supports open data, being able to take information from systems and be able to look at insights. And somebody told me the other day, I know we've all said we're data rich, but actually are we information poor in terms of not being able to do a lot with the data that we've got? Things like matching, things like having standard addresses, standard ways of referring to a resident. There's a lot of work that my authority needs to do to try and get a single view of families and people. So we're encouraging our staff to use the technology. We have embraced AI. We use Copilot because we're a Microsoft house. And we've also encouraged our staff to attend a free course, which is a change agents course. And that gives them an insight into the technology and also different ways of working, the psychology of change, the psychological safety aspects. And it's encouraging our staff because I think historically people think technology's coming in, it's going to get rid of my job, I'm not going to have a job. But by showing them the opportunities that technology can help, can take away the mundane work that they have to do, it opens up the opportunities for them to do something different. And certainly within the technology field, I'm really encouraging my teams to develop with my Socketing hat on. So Socketing is the Society for Innovation, Technology and Modernisation, and it's got over 2,000 local government members spanning about 300 organisations, and we're here to support our members. It's about encouraging people to come together on regular events like this one. We have regional and national events. We talk about experiences people have had. We invite suppliers to come and talk to us, and we also share experiences where things haven't gone quite so well, and what people can learn from it. So the whole ethos is to really help our organisations to accelerate the change, and that's very much focused around training and supporting leadership development. We have lots of courses around place-based leadership and encouraging women into IT. The stats show that there are fewer women in the technology zone, and we're trying to look at what's happening in schools and colleges to encourage people to take this as a career. I think there's also sometimes a stigma about working for local government. I'm not sure we really do the best we can to promote it as a really good place to come and work and develop. So there are great opportunities. We encourage apprenticeships, we support apprenticeships, and we've got some really good stories about where we take staff on at service desk level, and we train them up to become competent technologists. So as an organisation, we're doing a lot with our culture, very much similar to what you were saying about having people feeling empowered and people being allowed to do the right thing, because they're the capacity.
Sorry, I'm just conscious of time. I want to get to, but that is no, that's brilliant. Thank you. And I also think some people are still slightly struggling to hear. So if we can lift, that would be perfect. Thank you. I also think you've got a room full of people who would think that working in local government is the absolute best thing that we can do. So you're definitely preaching to the right audience. Thank you so much. There was so much there, and as I say, I do want to make sure we have time for people to be able to ask questions. So I'm going to keep my questions to just a couple for the panel, if I may, just picking up on some of the stuff that was said. So I'm going to tell you all of the questions I'm going to ask in advance, so you can be mulling over what you want to say, and then you can pick which one you'd like to answer. I want to talk, we've heard everyone now mention the importance of AI and how we can use it, but it would be good to understand, I think, a bit more practically, and maybe, James, that's a good one for you, kind of what does that mean? You know, how do we use it in a way that is hopefully going to give us those, savings or increased capacity, but also do it in a way that's going to be good for users, good for workforce. I want to pick up on several people talking about, and it was great, Carol was mentioning the sort of the vision for the Warsaw 2040 and that idea of being so ambitious in kind of the time frames, and yet we also heard, I think Angie, you mentioned, and possibly also Alison, the kind of the challenge of this sort of short-termism and how we managed to do that. And I wondered kind of, what are the opportunities that we have to be able to do some of that more strategic side of public service reform at a time when, let's face it, we're all firefighting so much, and that's having a big impact. And finally, I want to pick up on the workforce question, and maybe there's lots of different angles in getting into this, and everyone's mentioned data and how important it is, and maybe there's a data aspect in the workforce, but we've talked about empowering the front line, we've talked about, really allowing those experts who know their communities, know what they're doing, know literally down to a family or a street or a ward. How do we combine giving that freedom and autonomy, allowing, as Alison, you said, people to make the right decision, because they probably are most likely to know what that right decision is, but at the same time having accountability and making sure that we have transparency and we know what people are doing, because that also is very important in a democratic model. So I'm going to work down the line and you can pick up whichever of those you would like, because I do want to get to the audience. So perhaps if you could pick one or one and a half of those questions to touch on to get a different perspective from each person, and then I will open it up for Q&A. So James, to you first.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll tackle the AI one and the workforce one. So we think about AI broadly in three buckets. So I mean, generative AI obviously kind of creates stuff. It's a tool for kind of creating prose content. And in the functions that we support in HR and finance, there's a lot of prose content that gets created, often sort of manually. So things like job descriptions or annual reviews or knowledge articles or contracts or that kind of thing. And the automation of those is a sort of key area where we see applications. So for example, Workday users around the world create something like 60 million job descriptions a year in our tool. They normally take about 2 hours to do it. We think that can be brought down to about 10 minutes with generative AI. There's obviously some checking involved, but the kind of generation itself can be automated. Second way is providing assistance in the way that the kind of the flow of work happens. Now, AI has become very good at speaking natural language, so increasingly you won't need to log on to the HR tool or the finance tool in order to use it. You'll just be able to talk to it in Teams or Slack or something like that. You can already do that with Workday. You can say how many days holiday they've got left, and tell you can say, I'd like to book next Thursday off, and it can automatically book that for you and so on. And that's just going to get more sophisticated. And then lastly is the automation part. In particular, this is relevant in the sort of finance space, where you can automate business processes. Effectively, you can kind of harness a team of AI workers to do part of your job for you. And there's a whole lot of applications for that. So the one I quite like that we see in our organisation is anomaly detection. So simple example, if you have an organisation where people might claim expenses, it can detect whether the same person, but multiple people are claiming expense for the same item. So if a bunch of people go out for a meal and 4 of them put in the receipt and claim that, then it can spot that kind of thing. Not that that would ever happen, of course, in any of the organisations in this room, but it's that kind of ability to spot these kind of anomalies and flag them so you get improved compliance. Really exciting area for the application of AI, though, is how you manage skills, and I think this is a kind of, I could go on about this for ages, but applying kind of consumer-grade technology to the way that people interact with their HR system makes it a system of engagement or a system of record. And if they're talking to the tool and they're engaging with the tool and you're building people's skills profiles in the tool, then that opens up a whole new ways of managing your human resources. You can operate talent marketplaces or internal gigs. And I was struck by something that Joe said this morning about there being capacity out there, but it was just sort of locked in silos. We have a great case study from Rolls-Royce who implemented our Skills Cloud, which is our AI tool for managing skills. And just within the pilot, they discovered about 1,000 extra hours of work that people were willing to do when they used the talent marketplace to advertise opportunities to work on cooler projects. So the opportunity was, would you like to come and do this? But you have to find the time in your working day to do it. And all of a sudden, people found time in their working day to do the cool projects. So when you scale that kind of thing up to an organisation level, you can see it's a really powerful tool for kind of driving productivity in a way that is effectively a training of the workforce. You can do this cool thing, but you have to find the time alongside your day job to do it. So I'll stop there.
Brilliant, thank you. Picking one area, Angie, that you'd like to?
I was just going to give an AI example, and then I'll just talk very briefly about strategic reform. So for me, we're doing some amazing stuff with AI in an adult social care environment in Hertfordshire. I don't know how this works, don't ask me how it works, and it's all agreed, but we have facilities which we can have in individuals' homes, whereby we can have a dashboard which will tell us about that individual, about how often they're moving, it will tell about the ambient temperature, how often they go to the toilet, I'm not sure how they work that one out, so we can tell if people are looking after themselves, and if there's any cause for concern, we can get in there really quickly through the community health facilities. This is brilliant, the families love it because they can leave their older people confident. And this is happening now. There's so much more we can do to keep people out of care homes and out of hospital. It's really brilliant. So we've done some examples. I'm sure there's something on our website, but there are some really great bits of AI which are out there now, saving lives and keeping people independent. In terms of strategic reform, there is so much we could do with co-design with government. If we co-designed the policy together between local government and other public sector, it would make such difference. Government need to listen to us, but equally local government needs to get its act together and have one voice rather than sort of fighting between itself. So I think that alterations on both sides, we could start shifting that policy suite really quickly.
Brilliant. Three quick answers, similar to Angie. We're strategic partnership with Agilicis. We're using their Gen AI tool. We've got about 200 users and adults. They absolutely love it, so we're going with the energy. So, staff are really chomping at the bit. We're using it on case notes, we're using it in a whole range of things. But once you get those digital ambassadors, you can then do it across the organisation. So we've got people in PR, democratic services. We're actually going into children's now on the HCP plan. So there's a whole range of areas that we can use it in. And I think having that strategic relationship has really helped us, because I think it's really we're invested in that Gen AI tool and having the digital ambassadors. So amazing opportunities, and obviously taking account of the ethical considerations. So we're doing it in a sort of structured step-by-step approach. I think the message on that is go where the energy is in the organisation. You can see the people who love it, and we just go with them and let them fly with it and see where they take it. Obviously in a structured approach. I think similar to Angie on strategic reform, obviously I'm part of Greater Manchester Combined Authority. We're having conversations through the mayor and through the leaders around, what the next phase is of integrated settlement. We're trying to push harder and much faster in terms of what more we can do. People have seen what's happening in Greater Manchester with the work that we're doing on bus reform, the MBAC, the education and skills agenda. And one of the things that we need to do is make sure those conversations continue. So we're having some exciting conversations with government now over the Ridgwell programme. So that's linking the reform agenda and the health agenda to the growth agenda. So what can we do in terms of looking at the various government departments and thinking about how we can get more funding into GM and then at a local level. So I think strategic reform has to come really through our integrated settlements and those conversations with government. The feedback is they are listening. I think Angie aren't they, and we all know, but actually we need to continue to have those conversations and have those sort of real robust conversations about what they understand. And then the last thing on workforce is you've got to ask yourselves if you're a culture and values-based organisation. We don't have our values stuck on the wall as you come in, because people live and breathe them. You recruit on them. People are recruited into the organisation on them. We talk about them. We don't have performance conversations. We talk about how do you day in. Talk about values and behaviours. What does it mean to be positive, courageous, accountable, and kind? So it's less around that sort of performance, outcomes, productivity. It's more about you as a human and how you bring your whole self to work. And actually, if you tap into people's intrinsic motivation, which we're public servants, that's why we get up in the morning, because we're intrinsically motivated to make the lives of our residents a better place, and that's why we're here. Then tapping into intrinsic motivation is what makes people tick.
What's that saying? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Is that right? So absolutely right. And Carol?
Yeah, just briefly, we're using Copilot. We've got 300 licenses that we've issued across the organisation. We've said to directors, how do you want to deploy them? We've been running for about 6 months now, and it's really proving valuable in the administrative arena, minute taking, action notes, that kind of thing. So we're looking at the opportunities to make efficiencies there. Also introducing it into adult social care, social workers, transcribing notes and moving those notes into our case management system. And I suppose I've not mentioned members, but I think for me it's about how we support members in understanding the technology and the transformational work that we're doing, because at the end of the day they're the decision makers, and it's engaging with them on a regular basis.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, questions, which I'm going to ask you to be very brief on asking the questions so that we can get the answers. So lady in the middle there, whose arm shot up, I'm going to take the one at the back there. Let's take those two first because I'm just conscious of time. I know we have our next speakers already here. So it was a lady that...
Hi, I'm Helen Sims. I'm the Chief Executive of Sheffield. And I want to ask a question that reflects on capability at place, and it relates to my sector. So my question is, what are the capabilities you most value in your community and voluntary sector, and what are you doing to support them in terms of policy and practice, so that capability at place doesn't wither on the vine in face of current economic climate?
Great, thank you so much. And there's a... right at the back, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Angie Butterworth. I'm working in the Department of Education, looking at the digital systems that sit behind the early years expansion. 2 questions quickly. First one, how should we be trying to create this space and culture for innovative digital thinking? And then secondly, how can we collaborate between local and central government to create digital systems that deliver for people but alleviate and minimise the administrative burden on local authorities?
Brilliant questions, thank you so much. So who would like to pick up the capabilities that you value in community and voluntary sector, and how are you helping to develop those and support the development of those?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
I think it's by having that deep conversation, so actually going out and talking to community and voluntary sector and being prepared to have really tricky and difficult conversations, so having that honest approach, finding out what the blockages are, finding out what annoys them, finding out what the frustrations are, finding out what the dreams and hopes and aspirations are, so that's around that conversation. I think the second thing then is around actually putting some money behind things. So we've got amazing voluntary community sector, hundreds and hundreds of organisations. So by asking them, they actually know. So what is it you need? What can we do to help? Where can we stand alongside you and be alongside you? So that might be some investment. It might actually be stepping out the way and giving them the space to do that conversation. It might actually be facilitating, bringing people together. There's a whole range of things, but I think it is through the prongs of listening and the prongs of investment, and actually sometimes stepping away and communities doing the best. And I think just giving that, having that honest approach. So we've been doing a lot in terms of community capacity building for years and years, really, both in terms of investment, but also just letting people understand what they want as a sector. And the sector can flourish, I think, if you actually have that belief and the willingness to do things differently. And also, when the sector brings issues to you as a local authority, understanding that as all parts of the local authority need to get behind the sector. So it's all right me saying, of course we can do this, but if they then go to our legal team or our procurement team and our property team and they're getting a computer says no answer or the policy doesn't allow, then it takes that whole approach of an organisation to get behind the sector. So everything we do, we've been driven by the community sector, and anything that we can do to get behind their capacity, we will do, because they're the most important at the heart of our neighbourhoods. They've got all the solutions, we just need to believe in them and give them the right tools to be able to do it. And that's not in a paternalistic way, it's in a real honest conversation way to say, what do you want us to do and what can we do?
Brilliant. Angie, could you pick up the second question? So you've been very vocal on the relationship between the centre and... So how do you create that space to be innovative, and what would be the collaborative model that would allow you to reduce that 550 data points that you're having to feed back, which I imagine is phenomenally time-consuming, if nothing else?
So actually, I think a lot of what Alison said about the relationship and co-designing with the VCSFE is exactly the same as the relationship we should be developing with central government. And I do want to reiterate the point that was made earlier. Actually, we are making progress. I think, there is a better collaboration. I think there is listening and understanding. For me, about creating the space is about, maybe we can just stop some of the form filling and bidding rounds, which would actually create the space for having the thought processes.
What an outrageous idea, just
I
stop
know.
some of it.
In the NHS, that they're so under pressure, they've stopped all inspections. Why isn't local government given the same sort of opportunity, especially when it's acknowledged that some of the inspection regimes are not fit for purpose systems? So I think there are some things, sort of that checking the homework, actually. If we took a year, maybe 2 years off, maybe we would have the time to have those deep conversations. we need to think system-wide. So if with DFE we're doing something between the local government and DFE, we need to include the schools in that as well. So we're thinking sector-wide, and of course other settings where children thrive, including home education. And we need to have those deep conversations that you've talked about and listen openly so that we understand the constraints, because actually we don't know each other's worlds very well at all. So really understanding those constraints. And then the final thing is let's make knowledgeable decisions. So I've worked both in local government and central government, and very often we say, well, this is going to cost 2 million, we've only got 1.5 million, so we'll do this in 1.5 million. And we never commonly agree what the consequences of that are going to be and accept the risks and manage that. We just all end up totally dissatisfied in something that's perceived as a failure. But sometimes you can do good stuff with a little less money, and we should be up for that, but we just need to do that knowingly.
Brilliant. We are running out of time, but I want to come to Carol and James if you wanted to add anything to those two answers.
I think for me it's about having that common language, as I think sometimes different departments talk in different ways and we talk differently as well. So it's about having some shared narrative so that we can maybe use the forums that we've already got in place, don't create something new, but let's see where we come together and have more conversations. So I'm doing some work with the LGA. They're obviously talking to central government, and it's just opening up those opportunities for us to have the conversation.
Maybe sometimes, and I don't want to be a hater on central government because actually I'm a huge fan of what central government does, and I think if it devolved more and did less, it could be way better at the stuff that it's supposed to do well. But maybe more people, and it's great, we've had a few people who are out here today attending this, but maybe a few more people coming out to see how it actually works at times. James, do you want to add anything?
Just very briefly on the community point, and this is not quite an answer to the question, but one thing I did want to say is I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of the value of community organisations that are helping address the digital skills challenge in the UK. We used to think that was a generational problem, and as we all kind of grew up with technology and kind of reached our dotage, that we would be comfortable using technology. Well, that's not the case. People lose some of the ability to do this as they get older, as I've witnessed in my own family, but also the technology has shifted, and community organisations are taking a lot of the slack at the moment, and there's some really good work being done by organisations like Citizens Advice, Good Things Foundation, other smaller charities, and I think as we do more digitisation, particularly of the kind of citizen interaction with public services, that's going to be sort of super critical. I mean, it always was, it's going to get even more.
Can I just come back on a quick point?
We've got about 60 seconds.
6 seconds. It's the point of learning, so it link back to Angie and Carol, because Angie mentioned the family safeguarding hub, Hertfordshire, Lancashire, now Wigan. So actually, local government families really good at learning from each other, so let's do more of that.
Yeah.
Thank you to Reform and other organisations who help us learn, and also the other mechanisms that we have, like Carol and I know each other from the peer review, so you learn from other councils. So the beauty of local government and the beauty of days like today is that actually we can learn from each other and go and find out great ideas and bring them back. So that's what we've done with organisations. So it's not always about having the own solutions internally, it's about they're all out there, let's put them together and be collaborative.
What a fabulous way to end the panel. Like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, there's lots of great stuff going on, and if we can learn from each other, then actually we can achieve some of these things we've just been talking about. And actually, you know, the one thing that local government does tremendously well is innovating it, because you can do it at a scale where actually I think everybody has talked a little bit about we need to experiment, we need to accept sometimes things might not work, and then identify. You talk very compellingly about this, you know, maybe some things didn't go as well, and that's okay. Well, let's learn from that and let's do things better, and you can do that at local government scale in a way that I think central government is somewhat terrified to do, and that's a huge asset for devolving more and allowing people to experiment and get better and share those learnings. So brilliant note to end on. Thank you so much to my 4 panellists who've been brilliant. If we can thank them in the usual way.